Mr. Okonkwo felt a knot of bitterness tighten in his gut whenever he saw his neighbor, Mr. Nwoya, and his son, Chukwudubem. Chukwudubem, with his quick mind and bright smile, was everything Mr. Okonkwo wished his own son could have been.
Jealousy, like a poisonous vine, began to wrap itself around Mr. Okonkwo's heart. He saw the admiration in people's eyes when they spoke of Chukwudubem's accomplishments. He heard whispers of the young man's kindness, his generosity, his unwavering faith.
Mr. Okonkwo convinced himself that Mr. Nwoya and his son were showing off, flaunting their happiness like a challenge. He stewed in resentment, the joy of others a bitter pill he could not swallow. This envy festered within him, growing stronger with each passing day.
He began to avoid their company, unable to bear the sight of their contented faces. The once cordial greetings turned cold, the friendly banter silenced. Mr. Okonkwo withdrew into himself, the darkness of envy clouding his judgment. He failed to see the genuine warmth in Chukwudubem's eyes, the respect in Mr. Nwoya's greetings. His heart, hardened by envy, perceived only a mocking echo of his own unfulfilled desires.
He saw their prosperity as an affront, their happiness a personal insult. The joy that once filled his own household seemed a distant memory, replaced by the gnawing emptiness of envy. The more he focused on their blessings, the more his own life seemed to pale in comparison. One sweltering afternoon, as Mr. Okonkwo sat brooding in the shade of his mango tree, a sinister thought slithered into his mind. It whispered of a way to silence the laughter that haunted him, to extinguish the light that seemed to outshine his own. The voice, dark and insidious, suggested a terrible act, one that chilled him to the bone even as it ignited a twisted sense of hope.
He tried to banish the thought, to cling to the remnants of his conscience. But the serpent of envy had sunk its fangs deep, poisoning his mind with promises of retribution and relief. The image of Chukwudubem, struck down in his prime, flickered before his eyes.
Mr. Okonkwo imagined the grief that would engulf Mr. Nwoya, the whispers of pity that would replace the praises. The thought, once abhorrent, began to hold a perverse appeal. He told himself it was not malice that motivated him, but a desire to restore balance, to teach them a lesson about the fleeting nature of happiness. He clung to this twisted justification, silencing the voice of reason that screamed within him. The seed of envy, planted in resentment, had taken root and was growing into a monstrous thing.
He began to entertain the idea, toying with it as a child might play with a dangerous toy. He imagined the hushed whispers, the shocked faces, the fear that would grip the village. He reveled in the imagined downfall of his neighbors, the envy that had festered for so long now morphing into something far more sinister. Days turned into sleepless nights as Mr. Okonkwo grappled with the darkness that had taken hold of him. The once respected elder was now a prisoner of his own envy, his heart heavy with the weight of his sinister plan.
The laughter of children grated on his nerves. He withdrew further from the community. Mr. Okonkwo had built a wall of isolation around himself.
He spent his days plotting, researching ancient remedies. He sought out a reclusive herbalist, whispered to possess knowledge of both healing and harm. The herbalist revealed the recipe for a potent poison. The annual New Yam Festival arrived, a time for celebration, forgiveness, and communal feasting. It was a time when grudges were meant to be buried and hearts were open to the blessings of the harvest. But for Mr. Okonkwo, the festival was merely a veil for his sinister plan. He saw it as the perfect opportunity to strike, to mask his evil deed amidst the revelry and joy.
His heart pounded in his chest as he prepared the poisoned drink, his hands trembling slightly. He had chosen palm wine, a festive staple, knowing that Chukwudubem, with his fondness for the drink, would not refuse. As he poured the potent concoction into a beautifully carved gourd, a wave of nausea washed over him. He pushed it down, steeling himself with the thought of the envy that had driven him to this point.
The festival was in full swing when Mr. Okonkwo, his face a mask of forced cheer, approached Chukwudubem. The young man, his face lit by the bonfire and his laughter echoing through the night, greeted him with warmth and respect. He graciously accepted the gourd of palm wine, unaware of the deadly secret it held.
As Chukwudubem raised the gourd to his lips, a hush seemed to fall over the crowd. Mr. Okonkwo watched, his breath caught in his throat, a strange mix of anticipation and dread clutching at his insides. He stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the unsuspecting young man, the weight of his actions finally crashing down on him. Just as I was about to take a sip, a commotion erupted at the edge of the crowd.
A group of children, their faces flushed with excitement, came running towards the bonfire, chasing after a stray dog.
In the ensuing chaos, I was startled and stumbled back, the gourd slipping from my grasp and shattering on the ground.
The potent liquid seeped into the earth, its deadly purpose thwarted by a twist of fate.
I watched in stunned silence as my meticulously crafted plan unraveled before my eyes.
A wave of relief so profound it bordered on dizziness washed over him. He had been spared from committing the ultimate sin, his dark intentions thwarted by a force he couldn't deny.
But the near miss shook me to my core. I saw the hand of providence in the incident, a sign that I had strayed too far down a path of darkness.
The guilt and shame he had been suppressing surged through him, leaving him weak and trembling. He slipped away from the festivities unnoticed. The image of the shattered gourd and the spilled poison seared into his mind.
The night was long and torturous. I tossed and turned on my mat, haunted by what I had almost done.
He realized that envy had not only poisoned his heart, but had also brought him to the brink of destroying an innocent life. The weight of his sin pressed down on him, heavy and suffocating. The next morning, the village gathered for Sunday Mass. Mr. Okonkwo, his heart still heavy with the previous night's events, found himself drawn to the church.
I hoped to find solace in the familiar rituals, to seek absolution in the presence of God.
As he sat in the pew, the weight of his sin felt unbearable. The hymns seemed to mock him, the prayers echoing the turmoil in his soul.
The parable of the envious brother teaches us about the corrosive nature of envy, how it can poison the heart and lead to acts of unimaginable cruelty.
The priest emphasized the importance of forgiveness, of seeking redemption through confession and atonement.
Every word felt like a searing indictment, a mirror reflecting the darkness that had taken root within me.
Mr. Okonkwo felt the eyes of the congregation upon him, their gazes heavy with judgment. He knew that his sin, though unseen, had left its mark on him, a visible stain that set him apart from the other parishioners.
Whispering, "Do you see how troubled he looks?"
He tried to lose himself in the prayers, to find solace in the familiar words, but his guilt echoed louder than any hymn. He realized that true peace could only come from confessing his sin, from seeking forgiveness not only from God, but also from those he had wronged. Mr. Okonkwo left the church that day a changed man. The sermon had ignited a spark of remorse in his heart, a desperate yearning for redemption.
I could no longer bear the weight of my sin, the knowledge that I had come so close to destroying an innocent life.
He knew he had to confess, to face the consequences of his actions, no matter how severe. The guilt gnawed at him, a constant reminder of his transgression.
I withdrew further into myself, my once booming laugh silenced, my once bright eyes clouded with shame.
He avoided contact with Mr. Nwoye and Chukwudubem, the sight of their innocent faces a painful reminder of his own wickedness. The once respected elder, known for his wisdom and fairness, became a shadow of his former self.
My appetite vanished, my sleep plagued by nightmares of the poisoned drink and the near-fatal fall.
The villagers, sensing his torment but unaware of its root cause, whispered amongst themselves, attributing his decline to a curse or the wrath of the ancestors.
The burden of my sin became too heavy to bear. I realized that true freedom lay not in clinging to my envy and deceit, but in confessing my wrongdoing and seeking atonement.
The path to redemption was fraught with uncertainty, but he knew it was the only way to find peace. Driven by a need for atonement, Mr. Okonkwo sought out Mr. Nwoye. With trembling hands and tears streaming down his face, he confessed his sin.
I told him of the jealousy that had consumed me, the dark thoughts that had taken root in my heart, and the lengths to which I had gone to harm Chukwudubem.
Mr. Nwoye listened in stunned silence, his initial disbelief giving way to a mixture of anger, hurt, and pity.
I had always considered you a friend, a respected elder, and this revelation of your betrayal cuts deep.
Yet as he looked at the broken man before him, his heart softened. He saw the genuine remorse in Mr. Okonkwo's eyes, the desperate plea for forgiveness.
Father, please show mercy. I have always known Mr. Okonkwo as a kind and just man. This incident at the festival seems like a sign from God, a chance for him to confront his demons and seek forgiveness.
The confession, a torrent of remorse and self-reproach, seemed to lift a weight from Mr. Okonkwo's shoulders.
The words tumbled out. a river of guilt and shame, cleansing my soul with each syllable uttered. I knew I didn't deserve their forgiveness, but the act of confessing, of exposing my darkness to the light, brought me a measure of peace I hadn't felt in weeks.